First, you gotta work them out. So it's all loose here. You know, there's the contents. This is arranged alphabetically though, and some performance notes. This to it, this type of thing. I was really surprised to see a big publisher like Knopf accommodate this idea. They use blue staples. One thing I have to mention though is the build quality of the slipcase, where this happened. You know, it's made out of plastic, and I have to dock at least 5 Goodreads stars for the build quality alone. Plain Water was the first thing I read by her, and I was completely shocked at the time. Sort of loose nature kind of brought to mind like the ancient Asian poets, where they would write these poems anonymously and drop them into the river. I'm trying to go back in and find, here's one that's interesting, Good Dog 1, 2, and 3, because she composes these stanzas in clumps of words, and it reminds me of Chinese characters, you know, like how Chinese characters themselves are composed of, I guess you call them like prime characters or radicals. And those radicals themselves mean something, and taken together as a whole, when you read the Chinese word, it kind of gives you this image. Sometimes it's a poetic image that flashes in your mind. And I always wondered if somebody could accomplish that with English. She likes to do these lists, and let's see. Sometimes she kind of skips the numbers. One is where she talks about her brother who had passed away, and then this is about the death of the wife. She glancingly mentions a couple other extremely popular lit crit. Wendler. Wendler to me is like, reading Wendler to me is like watching an autopsy. Carson to me has more of a pulse. People like Edward Dahlberg or Guy Davenport or John D'Agata, you know, I mean, they kind of command some instant respect because of the fact that they know the classics so well. But what about the people who don't know the classics so well? What about the dumb classicists? I'd like to see some misinterpretations or someone completely wildly off the mark. This right here is one of the key pieces of the project. I feel Joan of Arc, the painter Francis Bacon, and the poet Frederick Holderlin have this compulsion, this need to destroy the established process or the convention of naming or cliche, just to kind of strike out against it. This is Bacon with his paintings. Initially, we want to think that he's obsessed with violence, but really what he's trying to do is depict the violence of reality, the reality that he perceives, the various emanations around objects and people. And not only that, sometimes to completely strike out against this blank sheet already contains all of the history of painting or literature, and that there's nothing you can put on a page that hasn't already been established. It takes it back even further, all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam is in the process of categorization, where he's just naming things and starting the tyranny of convention by this categorization. And she presents the apple to Eve to gain the knowledge as well, and she rebels against that. Her way of rebelling against that is to bite into the apple, not to gain the knowledge, but to tear it apart. This essay by Freud where he talks about Michelangelo's Moses statue, this is the moment right before Moses strikes down the tablets, supposedly, but you can tell by the posture and through this analysis of his body language, Freud comes to the conclusion that Moses witnessed the people in the camp dancing and worshiping the idol, but instead of running down in anger, he actually takes a moment and reins in that anger. This is a writer who throughout her career seems to have favored concision. Eventually there's a point where you get diminishing return. Here's a list of the seas of the moon in alphabetical order. What this reminds me of is a spider sitting on a large complex web, which has been her body of work so far. But now she's either too tired or too busy daydreaming that all she does now is sort of spin off these little intricate snowflakes made out of the web material. And watching them fall, you know, they're beautiful and they're very ethereal as they fall, but that doesn't hide the fact that this material is getting spun out of her ass. You know, actually, I don't know. I don't know if that's where it comes from. I mean, I don't know too much about spider anatomy, but I'm just kidding. I don't feel that way about Anne Carson at all. Although, yeah, some of the works can become swallowed up by the white space. Or I guess for some it can be considered frail. For others, it can be even more powerful that way, more sharp. Knife edge problem, you know? You gotta be careful, you're gonna get cut. It's the last iteration of the 0801 line. Got this from a preacher in Canada. Let it fall shut. think I might need some oil there in the pivot. Oh, shit. This is me trying to be a knife reviewer. Can't hang with those guys. I've got to resort to reviewing these pieces of paper with marks on them. Float by Anne Carson. It's a fun, interesting read. Really sets off a lot of thoughts. I'd recommend it. So next I'll be looking at either this Spanish writer that I'm reading or this Irish writer, one of his early works. Whichever one I get done first. They're both two totally different books. And thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next video.